Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for part of our Fresh Start Career Series, Navigating the Modern Job Search. My name is Chris Cicio, and I welcome you on behalf of the Penn State Abington Continuing Education Team. Our continuing education team here at Penn State Abington has three focus areas. We focus on professional development for individuals. We provide custom training for organizations, and we also have youth and community programming. Tonight's session is part of our Fresh Start Career Series, Career Exploration in 2022. We want to make sure that our students and prospective students, as well as our general community members, have access to the tools and resources that they might need that are necessary to advance their careers. If you have any questions through today's session, please feel free to drop them into the chat or into the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about these components that you may want to consider as you're conducting your job search. Some of the components of the job search include writing a resume, a cover letter. Many people still wonder if these are still a thing or not. The actual searching of a job that fits your career goals, networking, building an online brand and presence, particularly a LinkedIn profile, as well as what you can expect from potential employers during the search process. So now each of these topic areas that I'm discussing can be an entire session. So we're just really kind of going on a surface level here. But if there's something that really stands out to you that you're interested in, you can always send us a note and we can definitely plan more in-depth sessions for the future. So this is an overview of things that you might want to consider and that you might want to think about as you're writing your resume or updating your resume during your job search. The first thing to think about really is the type of job and type of company that you're interested in joining. You might be a teacher in K-12 right now, and maybe you want to transition into a job as a school administrator. Maybe you're a communications coordinator and you're looking for that next role in a management position. Maybe you're working in the nonprofit industry and you want to pivot or transition into a more corporate role. Or you might be open to a variety of positions and companies. It's important to research companies during your search process to better understand them. What are their values? Based on the job descriptions, what are they looking for in employees? I'd encourage you to look at multiple job descriptions and job postings at these companies, not just the ones that you're interested in, to gain a better understanding of who they are and what they value in employees. And you can really find a lot by searching their job postings. You'll see a little later that I used two resumes during my last job search. One that was a one-page, more modern resume that I used for startup companies and tech companies. And then I used a longer, more traditional one for academic institutions that I was applying to. I always make sure that my values align with those of a company and that I think that the culture would be a good fit for it. So I do a lot of research even before the application process. Many companies now use an applicant tracking system, also known as an ATS. This means that a digital system is reviewing your resume before a human does. And what does this mean for you as you're writing your resume? It means that you want to include some of the keywords that are used in the job posting in your resume. You can also do some research to see what skills are needed or most valued in this job that you're seeking to ensure you're using those keywords overall. It's helpful to customize your resume to each posting you apply to. Time consuming? Yes. Valuable? Very much so. There was a very popular organization that I wanted to work for once I graduated college, one that hundreds of applicants applied to each job. I applied dozens of times over years, but once I started doing this and really changing my resume to fit each job posting and using those keywords, that's when I started hearing from them and started receiving interviews. According to an article by Harvard Business Review in February of this year, skills-based hiring is on the rise. And according to a Forbes article published last year, 6 of these competencies that employers really value are communication, collaboration, critical thinking or problem solving, interpersonal skills, proactivity, and executive function. You may want to make sure that you're highlighting these soft skills and any additional certificates or certifications you've earned in addition to any traditional educational degrees that you have obtained. And lastly, I can't say it enough, but it's always a good idea to review. And this is really important because this can make you stand out as a candidate. After doing your research and customizing your resume and highlighting your strengths and your accomplishments, the last thing that you want is a typo or a mistake on your resume, maybe a formatting issue that's come up. It can be helpful for you to have somebody else, maybe a trusted colleague or a family member, to take a look at it too, in case that they see something that you may have missed. A question that many people ask is, are cover letters still relevant? Not all companies require one anymore, and you'll see that on a lot of applications and job postings that you're applying to. However, I do recommend that if it's an option, then you can include one, that writing one that's specific to an organization and shows how your experience really matches and aligns with the job description can make you stand out in an applicant pool. Cover letters also give you an opportunity to showcase your writing skills and explain anything that may stand out to an employer. For example, you may be living in Delaware and that shows on your resume or your cover letter, and you're applying to a job that's based in New York, but you want to be moving to New York and you're planning to move to New York to be closer to family. Instead of being looked over because your distance is far for what they're expecting for the role, this gives you a chance to explain that. The cover letter shouldn't just be a repeat of your resume in paragraph form, though. You want to make sure that you're highlighting different accomplishments and really going a little bit more in depth into who you are and giving your resume a bit of your personality. My final piece of advice is to customize the cover letter to the company job that you're applying to. You can start it with, I'm pleased to apply to this specific position at this specific company. But if you just write, I'm pleased to apply for this open role, it really will look like you're just mass applying to jobs, and it might stand out that you're not necessarily particularly specifically interested in that one position in that one company. You'll want to include your name, your city, state, metro area. Cover letters and resumes have gone a bit away of including your full address. You really can just use your city and state or metro area. You want to include your primary email and phone number. A lot of people like to include a link to their LinkedIn profile as well. And if you can, I would recommend using the hiring manager's name if it's available to you. Not all job postings have this easily accessible or listed, but if it is, it does make it a little bit more personable as you're writing this. And what are 2 or 3 of the required qualifications for that particular job that align with your experience best? You'll want to highlight those and give examples about how you fit those qualifications. And you can lastly finish with a strong conclusion about why you believe you're the best for the job, and thank them for their consideration. And I gave a bit of an example for a conclusion right on here that shows, I believe my creativity, collaborative spirit, and strength-based leadership really align with what this company is looking for and would make me an asset to it. And that does differ a bit from a typical resume, and it really does show how your strengths and your skills align with that position. This is a very common question that I really wanted to address, and this is, how long should my resume and cover letter be? As I mentioned before, many modern resumes are 1 page now. It can be more, though, depending on the job and the company. As I said, if you're applying to a position where you really need to highlight a lot of your work experience and maybe publications that you've written or things like that, or presentations that you've given, your resume is going to be longer. But it is acceptable to have a 1-page resume now. And I would recommend shorter is better, but I'd also encourage you to include what's important on your resume and really make sure that you're highlighting your strengths. And let's face it, employers, hiring teams are busy. The easier you can make it for employers to see your experience and skills, the better. As far as the cover letter, I would recommend this being 1 page or less. Sometimes we get caught up in listing everything that we think is important to the employer, but keeping it short, sweet, concise is really good for the cover letter, and just showing your personality and expanding upon your resume would be good for the cover letter. Here's an example of a 1-page resume. I've seen many people use a vertical column now. This one is more from top to bottom, and this is the modern resume that I was referring to previously. This is 1 page, and you can see that it's broken down by a brief introduction of myself, my experience, and very quick and to the point. I use numbers and key measurements here, and education, and then of course highlighting skills is important. And I would probably recommend actually including more skills and really highlighting that section a little bit more than I even have here. And here's a sample of what I was referring to with the 2-column 1-page resume. These are very popular right now. This is a very current looking resume, and I would recommend that you could use something like this as you're building your resume. I pulled this right from Resume Genius, and you can actually download these templates and use them. And here is an example of one of those more traditional longer resumes that I was referring to, that starts with education. And since I was applying to academic institutions at the time, I did want to highlight my education first and then move on to the professional experience. And again, this just goes back to customizing your resume to what you're applying for. So we're going to get into a little bit of the job search tips and where to search. Obviously, one of the best places to search is online, places like Indeed and LinkedIn. And I'm going to go a little bit more into LinkedIn later in this presentation. You can also look, and I would recommend this, you can look directly on company websites. If there's a company that you're very interested in working with, it may be helpful to look directly on their websites. If you're in a particular industry, it could be helpful to look on association or industry-specific websites as well. A couple of examples for jobs at universities, there is higheredjobs.com. For jobs with the government, you can look at usajobs.gov, or you could look at local municipalities and city governments who list their websites there. For jobs in the project management field, there's a job board on the Project Management Institute website, and this is pretty common amongst other associations and professional organizations. For jobs in the nonprofit industry, you may want to look at Idealist, that specifically lists nonprofit jobs, or you can also consider joining a professional association, and that may be helpful as well. Some people also find it helpful to seek professional help through recruiters or headhunters. So that's also something that you can consider if you think that you need a little bit of additional one-on-one coaching. And you may also have access to job boards through your college or through your college's alumni association. So I would definitely recommend looking at those too. And I want to touch upon a little bit about when to apply for jobs. While you can definitely apply to and receive job offers during any time, there are typically lulls in the hiring process during the holidays in December and during the midsummer months as well. And you should understand that you will need to dedicate time to this weekly if you're actively searching. It may be beneficial to schedule time once a week to search and customize your resume and your cover letter. According to an analysis done by Smart Recruiters, it's best to look early in the week, particularly on Tuesdays, as this is when recruiters and hiring managers are most likely to post new job openings. And I did want to talk a little bit about what to expect from employers during the job search process. Particularly a little bit about modes of communication. You can expect to receive messages potentially from recruiters directly on LinkedIn that are proactively searching for candidates. You may receive phone calls or emails to schedule interviews. And if you're actively searching, be sure to check your messages regularly. You definitely don't want to miss an important phone call. You might be like me that very, very rarely answers their cell phone, but when you're in the middle of an active job search, you want to make sure that you're checking those messages regularly and communicating in a timely fashion with a potential employer. And employers may even text you during the job search process to update you or coordinate schedules, which is a bit of a new way of communication. I would also recommend to prepare for the salary talk early. This can come up in one of the first phone calls that you receive. So make sure that if you are applying to a job that you're interested in, that you have an idea of what your salary expectations are. If you do receive that initial phone call from the employer, you can utilize Glassdoor and industry professional associations to your advantage to kind of understand what to expect and what are our best practices and guidelines for a particular job in your industry. And I'd be comfortable with asking them if they have a range if you don't necessarily know what you want to say at first. And be confident in your value and make sure that you ask for what you think is a fair and equitable salary. Those are my dogs in the background, so also prepare to have some of that sometimes too. And I would also make sure that you're preparing for a Zoom or a phone interview as the first step. And you might also want to prepare to maybe not hear from a job that you're very interested in. It's not always an easy process, and I would prepare to sometimes not hear from a job that you think that you are a perfect fit for. And prepare for the good phone call and be ready for that as well to schedule an interview or have that salary conversation. I would also recommend to apply sooner rather than later. A lot of employers or the automatic tracking systems look at jobs on a rolling basis, so you might be able to hear from them sooner. And understand that some industries are experiencing hiring surges like tech and healthcare, fintech, sustainability, e-commerce. These industries may have more job openings than others. You may want to do some research on what the fastest growing jobs are in your area if you're seeking a new position quickly. And my final tip on what to expect is that flexible work is here to stay. You can consider broadening your geographic location during your search, or consider broadening your search to fully remote roles. When we talk about where to search for jobs, one of the most important things to remember is the value of networking. I heard a story once from a friend who had started a job at a new company, and she had multiple people come up to her in those first few months asking her who she knew in the company, because the culture there with hiring was really using referrals, and it was unusual for somebody to come in that didn't have some sort of connection in that particular company. I think that really highlights the power of networking. Networking really can be one of the most effective and valuable parts of your modern job search. You may hear about jobs at companies that you're interested in before they are posted, so you know when to look for them and can be an early applicant. One of the questions that people often ask me is where to network. There are usually local networking events, and many are in person again. There's also, I see a lot of virtual options still, if you're more comfortable in that environment. Attending local Chamber of Commerce events or alumni association events, that's a great way to meet people in your region too. And I highly recommend attending professional conferences and taking full advantage of the networking opportunities there. Keep in touch with those connections that you may make, because they might have a job that is a perfect fit for you in the future. One of the best ways that you can network is by building an online brand and presence, particularly on LinkedIn, which is really the go-to place for professional networking online. Not only can you search for jobs there, but you can also network. So I recommend that if you don't have one already, to create a LinkedIn profile. It's quite user-friendly to create one. And if you do have one, keep it updated. I like to log in once a day during the work week to comment on a post or an article, or post an article that is interesting to me, and kind of comment on that and start a conversation about that on LinkedIn. I've made some very valuable professional connections on LinkedIn. They will not all be winners when you connect with people, but it's really a great place to connect and build your professional network. You can be creative with your title, which you see right here under my name. This shows up in searches, so you want to be concise and to the point. But you can definitely be creative here to help with when people are searching for particular candidates. You can see actually that I haven't really updated my responsibilities or accomplishments or highlights in my current role. So if I was taking my own advice, I would go in and update my profile. And I mentioned skills and skills-based hiring when I talked about resume building. It's good to include any certificates or licenses that you may have. This shows that you're willing to continuously learn and build or expand your skills and knowledge base. And this is one of the other things that you can have on your LinkedIn profile that can be helpful if people are, or if recruiters are proactively looking for candidates. The recommendations section, you can actually send requests to your connections for recommendations. When I left my prior job, I asked some of my colleagues there for recommendations just so that I could have that on my LinkedIn profile going forward from that particular job. And these are just some final tips that I wanted to give to you as we wrap up. I would suggest to not mass apply to jobs. This will give you the time to research companies and positions that you think are a good fit for you. This will also give you the ability to customize your resume and cover letter, which will make you stand out in the applicant pool. I'd focus on updating your LinkedIn profile during this period as well. Sometimes it's hard, but I really recommend to embrace networking and figuring out the best way to do that works for you. For me, I really enjoy attending professional conferences, whether they're online or in person, and creating connections that way. We have a shared interest. And just remember that this is not an overnight process or necessarily always an easy process. I really recommend to have patience with yourself. Make sure to not take things personally and to practice self-care during your search process. This will help you focus on your job search and lead you to the right role. These are a couple of our upcoming sessions as part of the Fresh Start Career Series. We have a project management lunch and learn coming up. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace lunch and learn as well next week. And that's a new program that we're launching in the fall. And then we also have an Aging Life Care 101 session coming up in the fall as well. And like I said, if you have any ideas or suggestions for these sessions going forward, please feel free to reach out to us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I will stay on for a couple of minutes to answer any of those questions that you may have. And again, thank you for joining us this evening.